Hello, everyone. I'm Ahmed from Mizna. I'm the film programs coordinator. And this month, we're presenting The Void Project by Palestinian filmmaker Azza El-Hassan. The Void Project explores the presence and absence of visual archives as a discourse in wartime, narrative foundation, and formation. This month, we're showing Jerusalem, Flower of All Cities, and Palestine.The, two Palestinian films that were restored by Azza in the Void Project, and the making of a revolutionary film, as well as Kings and Extras, digging for a Palestinian image, both of which were made by Azza herself. We'll be screening them in person at Trylon on May 24th, and they'll also be available online, worldwide, virtually, along with this discussion, May 25th to May 28th. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Palestinian filmmaker Azza El-Hassan. Azza is a winner of various film international awards, such as the Aleph Documentary Award, Lupino Visconti Award, Al Jazeera Jury Award, and the prestigious Grierson Award. Azza's practice takes a special interest in the use of visual archives, especially those that have been destroyed or abducted. She is the founder of The Void Project, a multimedia art project that aims to restore and resolve archival films, curate exhibitions, and produce narratives that centers around archives and the effect of their abduction on narratives. Hello, Azza. Welcome. Yeah, glad to have you.
Yeah, me too. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So maybe I'll just start it off. If you could tell us a little bit about The Void Project, how it came to be, how it all started, and how you got involved with that.
Well, years ago, I set on a journey from Palestine to Jordan to Syria to Lebanon in search of lost Palestinian archives. The truth is, at that point, I didn't want to find archives. I was more interested in how we make our own archives as we move and as we film. In 2019, I began thinking, what happens if we actually do find archives? You have to remember that every time there's a Palestinian institution where they're preserving films and photos, it gets destroyed, and then we create another institution, and so on. So there's a continuous loop of losing archives and not having images. And I felt that this is affecting our ability to create visual narratives. And I was wondering, what happens if we do find them? So I decided to find archives and to experiment with interacting with this material. That's how it first started. So in a way, the void is filling the void of absence, or dealing with the absence of what it means not to have images. And what do you do when you don't have images?
Yeah, and I would say, like the endeavor of archiving Palestine is sort of always, especially thinking about film, it is riddled, with loss and absences. Absolutely. Yeah. So I was wondering, how does absence come into play with the Void Project, and how is your adjacent work also, especially speaking, of Kings and Extras, how does it see absence, or how does it
Well, absence is not something you immediately need to fill. And not having something does not mean that, but as humans, usually we have a tendency to try and replace things. So the question is, how do you replace absence? How do you replace emptiness? Sorry. So if you look at artists' work, many times it's about finding creative ways to fill in absence. So it doesn't have to be with the actual original material. If this answers your question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I would say, like, for example, in Nadia Yaqub's book, Palestinian Cinema in the Days of Revolution, she notes that there's this idea, of a lost archive being laden with romance. In a strange way, when an archive or a record is thought to be lost, there is you could think of it as a silver lining, that it can be found once more. So then
and if you look at the
yeah,
relationship with the concept of Palestine itself, you have to remember most
right.
Palestinians are outside Palestine. And yes, Palestine is riddled with romance. We're very romantic toward the image and the space, and which probably is not true. But in a way, maybe we do need romance to be able to deal with loss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it sort of prompts a desire for this speculation or, treasure hunting, if you will, because at the same time, it does resonate, with the conception of Palestinians as a people defined by loss, but also, an ultimate hope of return. And
yeah,
even
I think it's romance is more about hope than about mourning the loss. It keeps you going.
Yeah.
So you do need it.
Yeah. And then, I know, like, for example, when the Palestinian Cinema Institution or other Palestinian organizations made films, they sort of printed different copies and they were sent to PLO offices around the world and to allies and film festivals. And supposedly some of these copies still exist. And then archival discourse, I think there's always a notion of, the original versus the copy and which one is.
Yeah, but I think I agree with you. Of course, there's still films that have survived the looting and destruction, but this is not the idea. The idea is that what remains after the loss becomes a constant reminder of the violence. It reminds you that you actually lost something. So having these films is more about the grand narrative and not about only these films. And this is why one question comes here is, can you treat these found films like any found footage? Can you appropriate them and rearrange them and reuse them just like you would use anything else? I actually think not, but this is a discussion.
Yeah. I would love to hear more about it. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, one of the nicest things is when you're sitting at your home and you open old boxes and you find old photos or old films. You just enjoy the treasures you've just unveiled, and you might, if you're a filmmaker or you're an artist, you might think of doing something with them. The problem is if you find something that it's not all about connecting with the past, but actually connecting with a violent past or with a past that has been abolished, then how do you deal with them? Is it that easy to just access them and play with them? Can you pretend as if nothing happened? And if you can't, then what do you do? And I think this is, for example, in The Void, when it started, I actually wanted to see if I can appropriate these films. And so I got them, not with the plan to restore them, but actually to use them. But then I found myself in an ethical dilemma, because if I just access them and I start rearranging them, then in a way I'm contributing to not letting people see these films. So I felt that there was an ethical position where you need to return these films to public domain and let people watch them.
Yeah.
And that's how the restoration began. I decided to begin restoring them and then releasing them. So when I released them, I was amazed how many people came to watch, not because they were really interested in the films themselves. It was an act of resistance. They wanted to see what has been denied. And some people watched them more than once. It was the power of the gaze. You just sit and look at the screen and say, I can see this. You can't stop me from watching it. And I felt that I couldn't treat them just like I would treat any other film. And I didn't want to meddle with them in a way. And this is why I actually decided in the end to just restore them and release them. It was only one thing in, Palestine in the Eye. Sorry about this. Yeah, so in Palestine in the Eye, But by that time, I had found lots of material related to Hani Joharieh. And I developed a love relationship with this man. I really liked him. So Hani Joharieh is a Palestinian photographer, and later on he joined the Palestine Film Institute and became one of the founders. And many of the early productions were actually shot by him. And then he was killed while filming. So in Palestine in the Eye, it's a film which the Institute made to celebrate his life after he was killed. And he appeared just as someone who was fighting for Palestine, and that was his life. And I can completely understand why they would do that. But as I got to know his other life, I struggled with that, and I wanted to tell the other story. But at the same time, I didn't want to appropriate Palestine in the Eye. So if you look at a remake of a revolutionary film, you will find that there's a clear cut. This is Palestine in the Eye. It stops, and then my intervention appears, and that's it. Because I didn't feel comfortable meddling with what has been violently taken before.
Yeah. And yeah, I would love to hear more about the actual restoration process and how that came to be. How did you find both films, Jerusalem, Flower of All Cities, and Palestine in the Eye? How did they make their way to you, and how did it take shape to actually restore them?
So I have a childhood friend who I filmed in Kings and Extras. Hiba is the daughter of Hani Joharieh. And through our childhood, I've always seen his personal photo album in their house. And one day she told me that they found in their attic film reels. Now, these film reels, it's not that they just found them. Her mother had taken them from the Institute in 1982 and hid them because she thought that the Institute will be attacked, and then moved. When she left Lebanon, she took them with her along with his camera and blah, 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 blah. So, and she's kept them in her house in Jordan all these years. And it's funny because whenever I talk to her about it, she told me about her constant fear of losing them. It's like she was hiding these things away. Yeah. And it was difficult actually to convince her to let us restore them, because of this fear that she will lose them if they're restored. Anyway, so I took the films from Jordan to London, and they were restored here. Now here, there was also another decision that needed to be taken. The technology now allows you to make a film look brand new. You can restore it to that point. And in a way, this also felt not very true to the history of these films. So I decided not to restore them to the maximum. In fact, the intervention happened only when it became difficult to see the image. So you would find there's still glitches in some of the images, which I think they should stay there. And that's it. And then after that, they were returned and they've been screened in lots of different parts of the world, and they're available online for anyone to see them. So yeah, there's always this, I think, in like restoration discourse, it's always a dilemma whether you're supposed to be returning a film to the way it looked like, when it first came out, or if it's supposed to, you're supposed to be showing, the wear and tear and the passage of time and the journey, because also like the copies that you got were probably different from some other copies that are somewhere else, and then you're like, there's a contradiction whether, you're supposed to treat them all as copies of the same thing, or, if each copy is now becoming, a whole, its own thing in a way. Yeah, I think that this is a very interesting discussion in restoration, because if you do restore them to how they were originally made, like in the perfect, in a way, it's untrue to the time like you're watching them today, and today is not yesterday.
Yeah.
They should appear as a product of today, what they have become after all these years. So that's how I think it should be done. But, Palestine in the Eye is a very, very interesting film. Because I think it tells the whole story of the Palestine Film Institute. It's not only a film about Jawhariya, it's about how the filmmakers saw themselves. There's this film, there's another film which is by Nabiha Lutfi called Because Roots Don't Die. And both films, they have, Because Roots Don't Die is about the massacre of Tal al-Za'atar, but you come out of it feeling fantastic. And if you look at Palestine in the Eye, although it's supposed to tell you about the death of one of the members of the Institute, it keeps telling you he didn't die in vain. And this is very special. They really saw themselves not only as filmmakers, but as people who wanted to change the world. And they were on a mission. And so it's quite a pleasure to watch it on different levels. There's also how they treated, like if you look at the film credit, it says workers in the film, and then it lists all the names. So you actually do not know who made this film. Because according to the credit, and the credit, by the way, is a contract. So whatever you put in the film credit is actually who made what. So years ago, I interviewed Mustafa Abu Ali, and I asked him about it. And he told me that they rejected the hierarchy in cinema. And they saw themselves all as workers in the Institute, which is really tender and nice.
Yeah.
Now, in the end, it was him and Jan Sham'oun who took the final decisions in how to cut this film and how to make it. But it's a joint effort of the whole Palestine Film Institute. So it's beautiful. Yeah. So it's really worth watching. I would tell people to really see it because it's a taste of filmmaking in the Arab world in the 70s.
Yeah.
There's also another thing which is really interesting is that this is a film institute where that was not only Palestinian. Anyone in the Arab world who saw themselves not only wanting to make commercial cinema and wanted to make something different, joined them. So there was Iraqis, Egyptians, Lebanese, it's beautiful. Actually, and also Europeans. You have to know that Godard joined them at one point, Jean. It's quite interesting to look at for any cinema lovers.
Yeah, especially for that time, there's a lot of international and transnational collaboration.
Yeah. So it's but the thing is, I do not appreciate archive fetish. So it's not that the aim of the Void project is only to find archives and restore it and blah, blah, blah. It's really to ask, what are we to do with what remains today? And it could be that we decide we do not want this past, although I don't think you can. I think you would become, what's the word for it? An absent person if you decide not to have anything, So you do need some grounding. But how do you deal with this grounding and what can you do with it? I think the question is.
I think especially in the case of Palestine, there's always, if we have a spectrum, you would put like archive fever or sort of like the wish to sort of archive everything on one end, but then there's also another concept that Gil Hochberg puts in her book that is like the archive fatigue, where the archive has been there and has been proving the same thing over and over again. And then, at some point it sort of just becomes not redundant, but it's sort of the archive. There's like a fatigue from just archiving, the same thing and like trying to prove the same thing.
But you see, because of the fear and which is a justifiable fear because Palestinians are constantly losing their archives, there's a tendency to collect rather than to look at the material. And I think I understand it and it's important. We need to collect because we're losing the material. but also we need to be able to look at what we're collecting and to interrogate it and see what we want to do with it. So you have to also think, see, in the Palestinian case, it's very interesting because things are so obvious and it's happening now, you deal with it. But to be honest, the whole Arab world suffers from a similar syndrome. Yani, archives in the whole Arab world are not being preserved and are not being questioned or looked at, or, you know. So I find Egyptian archive very interesting.
Yeah. I had a bit of an experience myself with that. I was working as an intern with CIMATEC, the Alternative Film Center in Cairo, and there is like a national film archive that exists, but then it's very inaccessible. You don't really know what's in there. It's only, limited to a small group of people that can access it. And then, what's the point of keeping all those things if they're not accessible?
And it's, for example, my childhood is made out of Egyptian films. So, and I think the childhood of most of the of people who grew up in the Arab world, it's really disturbing not to be able to see what I can do with Saad Husni, for example. It's like, that's it. Anyway, but I would I want to tell you a bit also about Jerusalem, Flowers of All Cities. So this film is also really a treat to watch for different reasons. First, part of it was shot prior to 1967, and it was shot by Jawhariya himself, who is from Jerusalem. So he was shooting his own city. And then in 1967, he was outside Palestine and was not able to return. So what you find as the film progresses, 1967 happens, and then you have loops of previous images as if it's his memory of the past. And also, so the film is images of Jerusalem over the song of Fairuz, the famous song, Zahrat al-Madain, Jerusalem, Flowers of All Cities. Now, this became a very famous musical video clip in the Arab world. And I actually think this is the first make of it. So it's interesting because then it was remade by different Arab channels where they would put images of Jerusalem and the song and blah, blah, blah. So it's interesting on different levels. Also, how in the end they depict the entrance of the Israeli soldiers into the city with continuous stills, and it's also very interesting to watch.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like, watching them together also just gives you a slightly different perspective, and then sort of seeing your work, afterwards, where you are in search of the images as well in a different way.
Well, I'm glad you like it. It's but also what's interesting, I was amazed with the reaction of how much people want to see these films. And it's that this is what also surprised me, like returning them to the public sphere. I didn't expect, because at the end of the day, they're black and white old films, which you wouldn't. But people, it's this idea of being denied from seeing them that people want to see them. So that's it. So I hope everyone enjoys them.
I hope so too. And like what you were saying earlier, it's becomes even about the idea of watching the films, not necessarily about the films themselves in a way.
That's quite.
But it's an act of resistance, to be able to view those images, that are usually denied.
So.
And then I just wanted to ask if what's coming next for the Void Project, if there's anything you're working on currently within the Void Project, or also just within your general practice.
Well, I'm working on my own film, which I've been working on it for a couple of years now. So it's called My Mother and Other Revolutionary Matters. And it's about my mom. I lost my mom a few years ago. And I've always used films to deal with issues, whether personal or political. But also it is a special story because in the 70s, my mom took me and went to Lebanon to join the PLO. So I take the journey of me with her. And in a way, her story is a catalyst to tell the story of where we were and where we are now, because the film continues after she passes away. And so I'm currently editing, so hopefully soon it will come out. And well, this is also, see, in my films, usually there's no archives. I've never used archives in the past, except in Asmahan. I don't know if you've seen this, but in Asmahan, it's not even using archives. It's just clips of Asmahan, who I turn into a Palestinian refugee through the film. So yeah, this is also, this time I'm actually playing with archives to construct the narrative. The film is exclusively made out of archives. Also in the Void project, I'm trying to trace the map of, so now we've done the revolutionary era, but there's lots of other eras in Palestinian production. And it's not only Palestinian, the Void should extend to other things. Yeah, so now it's tracing other areas, which hopefully will come out soon.
Yeah, great. This all sounds very exciting, and we look forward to watching them at some point down the line.
Any other questions?
I don't have any other questions, but yeah, if you have anything else that you'd like to share with us, and then we can keep it short.
No, I really enjoyed the discussion.
And
I hope everyone enjoys watching the films.
Yeah, I hope so too. And thank you so much for sharing your work with us, and for your time here.
Okay, all right. See you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.